Hello and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy podcast. My name is Jed. Hello, thanks for joining me. I hope you are having a fun time exploring the cause and nature of human problems, and I hope you are experiencing lots of wonder and joy in testing out your understanding and perhaps becoming free of what were previously blocks, and maybe even using that newly won freedom to explore the Logos even further and maybe even master this art of midwifery. If you're doing it, thumbs up. So, we are in chapter 2, and chapter 2 it's a very long chapter. It has a bunch of different parts. And so far, we have been looking at, this is what we've been examining, the newly identified class of human problems that we call the Pathologos. This is what makes it a game changer. This is what makes it a paradigm shift. This is what makes it this is one of the questions we are carrying as we read, perhaps the archetype or the paradigm of what we would call today psychotherapy. One of the questions that we got from chapter 1 is it really psychotherapy? Is psychotherapy really a thing, or is it an aspect of a more complete system called philosophy? If so, we could be returning to the Platonic tradition with a greater understanding of what causes our blocks to the Logos, which is a necessary complementary piece to the personal quest, the spiritual quest, the human quest to follow and master the Logos, and specifically through the dialectic. So, that's some questions we are carrying with us. What is this newly identified class of human problems that is a game changer to our species, hopefully, but for all of us individually at least? That's the Pathologos. So the first section of this part of chapter 2 is the nature of the Pathologos. We talked about that first. We've just finished exploring the condition and the transmission of the Pathologos. We talked about the necessary conditions: being young, being in a dependent relationship, having not yet realized that the connection between beauty and truth isn't always the case. In other words, if people appear beautiful or appear knowing and caring, that doesn't mean what they're saying is true. We were too young to have realized that. A sad truth about the physical world might not be the same in philosophy when we look at the realm of being. Nevertheless, as a child, we don't know this yet, being in a dependent relationship, still being young enough to have an image of authorities. And we talked about, so these are all necessary conditions for getting a Pathologos as an individual, but within the family, there has to be other conditions like a milieu set up, certain states of mind managed within the family in various different ways to create a certain backdrop, a whole bunch of things happening that create puzzles and confusion and frustration for the child that they are seeking to make sense of. And within that milieu, that is setting the conditions for the specific Pathologos drama of the origin scene. So that backdrop has to be there so that when they finally jump on the child and play out this act, it's an act. They know they're playing an act. They don't know why they're playing an act. They have the conditions of the milieu set up around it. So when they play out this bollocks game on the child's has to, it's done in order that the child comes to the conclusion himself. They don't make you believe it, but they just do all this work to create what they think would be an inevitable conclusion. And it makes sense of the milieu that they have set up. It makes sense of the states of mind. It makes sense of the activities of the family. So it's a kind of false solution to orchestrated problems. So one way of understanding the cause of human problems is it's a kind of solution that we need to drop because it was false. And it might have helped our survival growing up as a baby, but it doesn't apply to the real world. To think that the solution to this milieu and fake drama and the from that drama, the pathologos belief that resulted, that belief that made sense of all this crap, to believe that this is an analogy to the real world, that's how our problems manifest. We are carrying a false analogy. And so the conditions, the milieu, the conditions for the drama, and the drama are the conditions for the specific false belief about oneself and reality that is made wordlessly. That's one of the conditions. Words are not tolerated. Questions are not tolerated. So that the child walks away with a false belief about themselves, taking the blame. That's another condition. They give the benefit of the doubt to the parents, which they shouldn't, because it was a scam. And another condition is, within that drama, they don't reject it as an act. The child thinks something like, hell, if I wasn't doing anything special to warrant this kind of attack, imagine if I questioned the whole game. So we talked about the conditions from being in early childhood, the image of authority and so on, being in a dependent relationship, and then the next level of condition, the milieu, the states of mind and activities of the house and family, setting the backdrop, which is itself a condition for the pathologos drama, the specific origin scene, and all that is the condition for the wordless, unspoken, unquestioned, false belief about oneself and the world that we walk away with, called the pathologos. That is the condition for the false analogy we carry with us in our world. So these are all the conditions of the transmission of the pathologos that we've been reading. It's been really interesting. And of course, all of those things we can recognize as what's false. In other words, if this is a kind of initiation ritual into a family sickness, then what would be the true thing? Does therefore our soul have the conditions to be open to a genuine initiation? What would that be? So now we're learning about philosophy. By understanding its shadow, its distorted shadow of the pathologos, we can gain new questions and maybe even insights into the other half of the game, philosophy. Is true philosophy a kind of setting the conditions for a true spiritual initiation? Not the appearance of beauty, truth, goodness, and care, but the nature of beauty, truth, goodness, and care? Can that then therefore be a true analogy we can carry with us? Everything we do in the world would be the lesser, mirroring or trying to bring us to the greater of that experience? Is that the enlightenment experience of being, or nous? Is therefore, if words are not tolerated within the pathologos scene, if that's one of the conditions for the transmission of the pathologos, does that mean that true learning, true spirituality must always have words? Is that the logos? Therefore, spiritual traditions that reject words, various kinds of Buddhisms and Taoisms and things, you can take your pick, that don't like questions, even most religions, even regular Western religions, don't like questions, don't like words. Well, if questions are not tolerated and words are not allowed, does that mean that a true spiritual tradition must have those things? Otherwise it will have problems and it won't be complete? Is that why we pull out the key, learn a key language of the self-logos when we read? Why we must be reading the Balboa translation of Socrates to get those keywords, and also to have the actual structure of the text so we can put those words within a context to generate questions. Oh, a key. Where's the door for this key? And could that be one of the reasons why we have to reawaken philosophy? Because all of the past translations have been garbage. You can't do any of that. Most of the keywords have been mistranslated or left out, or translated in its opposite way, and the structure isn't kept either. So you can't get the keys and you can't find the doors. The doors in the structure. And so the analogy we often use is if you're in a video game and you're walking down a hall and you see all of the paintings on the left have gems in the eyes, but the paintings on the right don't, then you might realize, oh, I can tell from the structure of how these paintings are organized within this game that I need to find the gems and put them over here. And the gems would be the logos, the key terms, which again, you have to be in the Balboa translation to have, and the structure we can recognize as the dialectic. So, we are learning about the Pathologos while also generating questions and maybe even insights about what it is a shadow of. The actual self-logos. Okay, another condition for the transmission of the Pathologos is, of course, our state of mind. That's something we are focusing a lot on right now as we read the Meno. What is the state of mind that is a necessary condition for the transmission of this false initiation scene into a false idea of the self that doesn't help us but causes our problems and suffering? An open, receptive, curious, wondering state of mind where you are focused on your own self goals. You're not concerned about helping others or being a slave to your parents or how to, what we would call today selfless, which of course is a word we don't use here because we don't want to, because in a slave or a domination authority society, they teach us that seeking goals for yourself is bad. You must sacrifice for the king and the country and the rich people, right? Be a good slave. Seeking your self goals is selfish. That's bad. Abandoning your higher self goals is selfless. That's good. Bollocks. Bollocks to all that crap. We replace those words with self-full because your purpose is to meet your self goals with the self-logos in a self state of mind. That's the only way you can actually help people. You don't help people by sacrificing yourself to be a slave to their ignorance. That doesn't help anything. It doesn't stop the Pathologos. It submits to the Pathologos, which is why we say we are always in a dialectic. We are either a slave to a terrible, unjust master, the Pathologos, or we are playing this game of midwifery and philosophy to become a master of the game we are in, a self-master. We're gaining self-mastership. A master who is consciously choosing the dialectic of not the Pathologos, but the logos. To be in that kind of a dialectic in each moment as we live as human beings. So that state of mind is one of the conditions for the transmission. And notice, it isn't a bad one. It's a good one. And as we were going through that, we reflected on the fact that, hey, how come when people do really well, others are more inclined to get triggered, to act viciously and primally and bestially, to attack people who are doing well? Why do people want to yell at LeBron James? Why do people want to knock others down? Why is it when you're having the best kind of conversation, strangers seem compelled to interrupt or interject and act in the worst kinds of ways? You may have even seen these people before here or there, and they haven't acted so terribly. But when you do well, why is that? So we had that question as we reflected on the fact that the condition for the parent to introduce themselves, to interrupt, to interject, to stop the self-goal, to stop the self-focus, because hey, what does the parent get out of this? Nothing. So in the negative sense, selfish, the negative, so preventing the self-fullness of the child, wanting them to make a slave, saying, hey, this is as far as you get, no further. What are the conditions for that? The child doing well, being focused on their own self, their own goals, often in a reflective state, so nothing practical, not about the physical world where you can manipulate and abuse people. Usually it's in self-reflection, which is what we're here for, the realm of mind. You can't steal people's mind. You can make them abandon their mind and self-goals to be a physical slave. But you can't steal other people's enlightenment experiences. or insights or understanding or personal development. You can't steal that, as you can steal their wealth through slavery or oppression or fascism or capitalism. The same things playing out on a global scale at this point of history. Hopefully we're at a turning point where we wake up to this and discover, oh, that's just the inevitable consequences of the pathologos that keep you trapped to the physical world, keep you enslaved to your physical desires, keep you acting without learning what justice is. That's the logos, abandoning your quest of the logos, and therefore trying to stop people from engaging in things you can't steal or exploit, insight, enlightenment experiences, and trying to make them slave through physical necessity to physical activities that you can easily exploit through money, capitalism, fascism, and all of the systems of oppression that we are living in right now, that are all irrational, harmful, destroying ourselves and the planet, that can be easily understood and seen as a puzzle that we are here to solve, so long as we reach the next stage of our evolution, which is what we are doing here, learning the logos. So it's curious that one of the conditions is a good state of mind, not a bad one. Often, well, very different than a current trendy belief that our problems are caused by trauma. It's a trendy belief that people have about the cause of problems. That's common in psychology and whatever, that it's has to be a traumatic event. It doesn't have to be. It's literally you're in a good state of mind to begin with, before the imposition of this drama that is to create the conditions for us to ourselves wordlessly take the blame, give the benefit of the doubt to the people inflicting that and taking the blame. So another one of the conditions is not only that open, curious state of mind, but also not speaking up. So one of the questions that we read in this section 2 is, why didn't we reject it as an act? And so that's part 1, and the second part of that rejection is not just rejected as an act, but rejected as also unjust. This is bollocks. You guys are just putting on masks, cosplaying as idiots that you think are wise. I don't buy into that. And also, it's wrong and unjust. It's unfair, we might say today. That's what we should have said, could have said. Then our life would have taken a different form. Now, of course, we talked about how difficult that would be for a child, unfamiliar with the real world. All they know is the house. In those dependent relationships, it can be a real shock to see your loved ones actually acting in the worst way towards your soul. Even as adults, that's very difficult to have. The worst thing you can do is say, make a joke at the expense of my mother. My mother's a saint. Or my father. Whoa, I learned how to be a man from my dad. He's the best. Yes, he has his problems, but he overcame adversity, you know. This is very common. We defend the people who pass on our pathologos. That's why we have our problems. There's no reason to do that. Why not just tell the truth? All right, so that in order to tell the truth and let go of our beloved false images of beauty requires a certain level of commitment. That's rare. We talked about this. So this is the conditions for the removal of the pathologos: a kind of commitment, a kind of integrity, a kind of courage to face the truth, even though what's false is familiar and comfortable. It takes courage. It feels like this thing is right, but it's not. How do I follow what I'm learning through the logos and understanding, even though my feelings say something different? It takes courage. So commitment to stay in the game, maturity to reflect with this level of integrity, courage to follow the logos even when it feels like the pathologos is right, or the pathologos is counter-attacking your insights. Self-reflection. All of these things are conditions for becoming free and personal and spiritual development, but all of these things are rare, very rare, even within adults. So we need to be aware of that, because we are challenging ourselves to act in a very rare way. The best kind of way, but again, very rare. And extremely rare for a child to have all these qualities from birth, such that they could speak up when it would be dangerous to, or challenging to, or even a psychic shock to realize the people that you're dependent on would act in such a terrible way. And to speak up in words, challenge the truth of the truth of the whole act, it's just an act, and the justice of the whole act, it's unjust or unfair. So that's what we need to do now. And most of us probably are adults who are out of the house, and it's a lot easier to do that than it was as a child. So all of those are the conditions for the transmission. And as it was wordless, unspoken, we don't know we carry it. So we have to learn how to trace our way from how we manifest our problems, how it comes up in our states of minds and words, specifically when we seek our most meaningful goals, specifically when we're mastering the logos and philosophy. Look for an order and pattern, trace it back through time to find the origin scene that we have been talking about. So this, and therefore, and use our learning that we get from that journey to be able to face that origin scene. So this is also represented in the hero's journey. You might have a heroic character like a Luke Skywalker, for example, who starts off with his problems and living in obscurity on his moisture farm, not doing anything that meaningful. Let's use a different color. What color? This one. Yep. But then he notices that there are problems brought to light. So someone usually has to come in and introduce him to this new world. That's this podcast, by the way. This is your introduction. You've got the question. Hey, by the way, do you know that you have these problems you might not have suspected, and they are understandable, and it's entirely possible to verify that you do live in a caring and intelligible universe, and you need to realize that because it's a kind of proof based on an experience and understanding that the mind is constantly communicating to you and for your benefit. A benefit that you can reach through this learning of the logos and pathologos, which frees you from your problems and helps you reach and is what takes you to your destiny. So that's if Luke Skywalker didn't have Obi-Wan Kenobi coming in on the spaceship to inform him of the Force, inform him of the problems of the Empire, then he wouldn't start the journey. So that's this book, that's this channel. So once you realize that you have to look for the evidence of the problem. Oh, there's a problem on this planet. There's a problem with the Force over here. There's a problem with these Imperial soldiers. You trace it back, you look for a pattern, you realize that there is a cause to it. That's Darth Vader and the Emperor on the Death Star. But that journey you go through to reach the original cause of the problem, reach Darth Vader or the Emperor, is a kind of training so that when you do get back there, you have leveled up enough that you can actually address it and defeat this cause. That's Harry Potter, that's Katniss, that's in Hunger Games, that's the archetype of stories that appeal to us as human beings. So you could say, well, hang on a second, if that's Luke Skywalker, if that's Harry Potter, if that's Katniss from the Hunger Games, if that's all these other video games and stories and dramas and stuff, well, that's the beginning. In other words, that's the many that you look for, the many problems of the Empire that you then look for a pattern of, the blueprints of the Death Star or the plans of the Empire. You look for a pattern, you trace all of those many things through the pattern to its original cause, and that learning process has hopefully helped you develop and level up your understanding so that when you get to the original cause, you can approach it in a beneficial way and level up or complete the quest and benefit from it. Now, we were using solving our problems. That's the metaphor of defeating Darth Vader And that's the metaphor for tracing our problems back through the various manyness of the problems manifesting, the manyness of our blocks, the many negative states in mind and words, tracing it back through the past, looking for a pattern. So that's the application of the dialectic that we will learn, tracing it all the way back to the origin scene. And now, because that process of tracing it back has been through the logos and dialectic, we have developed a mastery of the dialectic and logos that we can use to address this origin scene with the logos and dialectic that we didn't have as a child. So one of the conditions for the transmission is you don't have the logos and the dialectic, or you do have it, but you don't have the experience with it. You have the force, but you're not as familiar with it. So if that's the metaphor for what's negative or removing our problems, then over here is what's positive. If we recognize that all positive stories that have a positive appeal to human beings, video games, stories, movies, narratives, TV shows, if they are a manyness, then we can also trace them back to its original cause. And hopefully if we do that, we will be leveling up in that process. And then when we do find that original cause, we can make use of it in a way that benefits us. What's that? That's tracing many examples of the hero's journey back to its archetypal cause of the hero's journey. That which is true for everyone, because the hero's journey applies to all human cultures. In other words, what is the fundamental principle that applies to all human beings and maybe all intelligent creatures who have awakened to the ability to self-reflect and use words? What is the fundamental or the primary hero's journey? This. Every human being has a pathologos they have to follow that journey to free themselves from, but also that freedom allows them to do the exact same thing with the positive and the negative. So we look at many examples of the hero's journey, or many examples of beauty, or many examples of justice, to trace that back to its original cause of justice itself, beauty itself in being. And hopefully our experience of that, what can be called a yoga experience or a spiritual experience or a enlightenment experience. In Greek, we use the word nous, to behold that original cause of the many. When you do it, hopefully you've got back there through this development of the logos. Luke Skywalker wasn't just thrown into the Death Star right at the beginning. He had to learn the Force. He had to develop. He had to face challenges, overcome them to develop his own understanding and level up. Equally too, the spiritual method of following the Logos is exactly that. Looking at the many, tracing it back through the dialectic so that when you reach the level of being, you have that understanding with you in your back pocket. You have that skill of using the dialectic to reflect and understand. So you can make sense of that, maybe go into that experience in greater depth. And then when you come out of that enlightenment experience or that nous experience of being, you can make use of it the way Socrates does to benefit people. Again, you have that experience in a way where you can benefit. That makes all the difference. That's the difference the Logos makes. You can actually benefit. And you can go back there. That's another benefit you get from it. You can benefit in that you can use it to relate to yourself in a good way, a positive way. You can relate to others and the world in a good, positive way. And maybe you can even take all of that and turn it upon itself. And look at the aspects even of that original cause of being and wonder, could there even be a cause of being? That's the journey from nous to the self. The first hypothesis of Parmenides. So that's what we have been doing over here in the negative, and that's how we can take what we're doing in midwifery to generate questions and insights, not just about this, which is the most important thing, but the other most important thing, the positive, philosophy. And realize, hang on a second, this positive and negative all follow the same structure of the dialectic. So this dialectic seems to be important. I better remember how to use the dialectic and think about it a lot. How can I remember the parts of the dialectic and remember how to use it? And tell other people about it too. Ooh, that's mythology. Mythology is the creating drama, characters, narratives to represent this dialectic that applies equally to philosophy and midwifery, to the positive and the negative, the two parts of the hero's journey. Helps you remember it, helps you talk about it, helps you convey it to the rest of humanity. So we can say the true spiritual paradigm, or the true educational paradigm, the true personal development paradigm, the true system of spirituality is a triad of the negative, the positive, and the both. By the way, negative, positive, and both is a subsection within the dialectic of each of those four categories that we've been looking at: self to self, definition; self to others, demonstration; others to others, others back to self. These are the four categories of the dialectic that we have to learn, or we're here to learn. Of each of these things, what can you say about the subject itself? Well, you can say true things about it. You can say things that are never true about it. What is beauty? Oh, well, it's eternity. It's always true. Wow. What isn't beauty? Oh, it's not just an opinion, or it's not ugliness. What's both true and false about it? Well, it's accessible to all. That's true because everybody can access it who is open to following the logos, but it's not true for those who are stuck in the physical world of appearances and are closed to following the logos, who are in a dialectic with their pathologos. So these are the three possible things that you can say about anything. You can say things that are true, things that are false, and things that are both true and false. So you can say, well, if there are these four categories of the dialectic, you have to talk about what is and what isn't. So what is would be philosophy, the truth of self and reality. What isn't is the pathologos. So you can say that there are really 8 categories because they double. You can say, well, actually, if each of those have 3 parts, you've got 8 times 3. So there's true, false, and both, true, false, and both, true, both, false, and both, blah, blah, blah. For all of them, true, false, and both, true, false, and both, blah, blah, blah. So that's 3 times 8, which is math. 24. So that there are, you could say, well, there's only 2 parts of the dialectic, self and other. So that's the most fundamental way of understanding it. And you're either in a dialectic as a human being with the false idea of the self, a slave to the pathologos, or you are mastering the self-logos. So that's your life. You're either Luke Skywalker, member of the dark side, or you're Luke Skywalker, member of the light side. That's it. There's no neutral ground in this game, because you're always doing something. You're either doing what's positive, or you could say, well, actually, we're doing both because we jump between, so long as you're in the game. So dialectic has 2 parts. Well, actually, it has 4 parts, because there are 4 ways of organizing self and other. Self to self is one. It's 4 ways of organizing these 2 terms. Self to self, self to other, other to other, other to... So you can say there's 4 categories. But technically you have to do both A and B, what is and what isn't. So technically there are 8 categories. But of all of those 8 categories, you can say 3 things. So there's 24 categories. Those are the ways of looking at the dialectic. So if that's true, then how do you remember those 24 categories? Mythology. Make movies, make video games, make songs, make music, make conversations with your friend over coffee. So have a sip of coffee. In which you represent those 24 categories, or those 24 categories applied to whatever you're learning about. You could be learning about beauty or justice, or you could be learning about the Pathologos, and make stories about it. So therefore, those 3 categories, what it is, what it isn't, and both, would be the 3 primary categories of the complete spiritual tradition. Neat. Which is neat to see, and pretty rad, and pretty cool. No one gets excluded, no one gets deported, no one gets genocided. Everyone can play. Everyone. Everyone has a Pathologos that causes their problems. Everyone's here to remember and rediscover and remaster the Logos. And everyone does other things too, or usually, that they can represent the principles of both in. Make movies with the dialectic. Talk to your co-workers through the dialectic. Manage a business using the dialectic. Teach classes with the dialectic. The 3 aspects of the spiritual tradition. That's cool.
Wow.
All right, so all of that was what we've just finished. That was a quick summary of the conditions of the transmission of the Pathologos. And now we're on this part here, amnesia. That's the section of the text that we're jumping into now. What the heck does amnesia have to do with our problems? Okay. All right, so we're on the section of Chapter 2, Understanding the Pathologos, a newly identified class of human problems. What is amnesia? Well, we've just done a review of the condition, the transmission of the Pathologos, but let's remind us what we saw in the first part of the Pathologos, the nature of the Pathologos. Let's scoot over to this part of the board. Well, here are some notes on that first section. First of all, it's a monad. Monad. What's monad? Monad is fancy talk for, or not fancy talk, Logos talk. It's important to learn the language of the Logos. That's what we're learning, because the language of the Logos is a language that you can use to understand yourself, understand your mind, also understand philosophy, because Socrates is just guiding us to help us understand ourselves and our mind. He's doing his best. So monad is one of those words, new words that we can get. Monad. It means a oneness. Oneness. So it's a monad. It's a kind of oneness. Our Pathologos is a kind of singular thing. Now, monad is often used next to the word henad. Henad is a one. Monad is a oneness. Now, a monad is a oneness, which means oneness means a unity. In other words, it has parts. It has parts, but it's functioning as a whole one. So this monad is what we do when we look at the nature of truth or being, the realm of being. We see it has eidos, aspects, but it's a monad. So the Pathologos is a kind of monad, or the negative version of being, which is our focus and goal in philosophy. So one way of understanding a curious expression that we come across in philosophy, we've come across it in our reading of Parmenides, is let's use a different color. What color? This one. Is non-being. What the heck is non-being? That's a puzzle we have when we read Socrates. And Parmenides, because it's mentioned as being very significant. Parmenides, when Socrates was first learning philosophy from Parmenides, Parmenides says, don't ever entertain the thought of non-being. Don't go down that road. That's a problem. Don't go down the road of non-being. But one of the problems we have with Plato is he didn't include all this understanding of the Pathologos, which is why we have to do both Socrates and Pierre Grimes, both Socrates or the Logos and Pathologos. So if they're not mentioning the Pathologos, how do we understand what this word is? They say it's very important. It's something to be avoided. Don't go down that train. Well, how can something be non-being? Being means exist. Now, does he mean like nihilism? Nothing exists? No. That's the ninth hypothesis of Parmenides. The lowest way of thinking, that there's nothing that exists. That's not non-being. What is non-being? Well, here we have a possible, again, you see how it's complementary, right? You can see how understanding midwifery helps us understand philosophy and vice versa. Well, if midwifery is the negative reflection, and it's a monad, and monad is the nature of being, then maybe non-being is this guy here. Maybe it's the Pathologos. It would make sense of a lot of puzzles that we get in philosophy. So we can take that, so we can generate questions, but we can also generate ifs or hypotheses. We can take this question, take this hypothesis, put it in our sacks, take it back with us as we go back to Plato. Because the nature of the Pathologos, it's a monad. And it manifests its numerous occurrences of itself. So there it is as a monad. Ow. I did the thing to turn my pen on, but I did it on the pointy side. Gave myself an ouch. So we have, it's a monad, it's a oneness. Pathologos is a oneness. Do we have many Pathologos? Well, I think it seems to be that just one. But it manifests numerous occurrences of itself. So it's a generating monad. Does that reflect what we've been learning about being? That's a question we can take with us. To have a question is to be on a quest. It's a monad that comes from dramatic scenes. There's Ma and Pa and the little baby. Make the baby a bit easy to see. There we go. It's a monad that manifests numerous instances of its occurrences of itself from dramatic scenes, and it's cyclical. It's cyclical. Our Pathologos problems repeat over and over and over again, over and over, and there are ups and downs, so we can wonder about how come sometimes we're in a good state, but then it's followed by a bad state. Sometimes we go up a little bit, but then down again. But it always seems to be repeating the same problem over and over. So these are puzzles that you might have had already about your own life, because you are living your life, you are in that dialectic of that human being. So you might have wondered, hang on a second, there are these ups and downs and these repeating, I have the same problem over and over again, or I have the same state of mind, or I shoot myself down the same way, or I get involved with the same sorts of people, or I date the same kind of jerk. And it starts good, but then it gets bad, but then he says, oh, I'm sorry, but then I get back to him, blah, 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 blah. This cyclical nature of our problems might have been what you noticed already that drew you to understanding. Once you've seen there's a pattern, it shows that it is understandable. Patterns like this is a mark of what we call intelligibility, understandability. So it's cyclical. The Pathologos is cyclical. it has our problems linked together into a unity. So this is the what we talked about, monad being a oneness of qualities. All of the problems you can link. You can put a big mind map. There's a fundamental monad at the big. No, I'm using the. It's a fundamental monad in the middle. That's the pathologos. But this fundamental problem creates that problem and that problem. But this problem relates to that problem. But that problem's also supported by this problem. They're linked together, which means we can look for, like, as we've already, it's interesting, we've already been talking about this. Once we've seen the manyness of problems, once we notice the intelligibility of the problems, we can trace that map to determine the origin. That's the dialectic as well. Dialectics help you reflect on the cause. That's what it means to be rational and mature, reflect on causes. So if there's a problem with your toaster, if you're rational and mature, you would reflect on the cause of the problem. You wouldn't yell at your toaster. Same too within our species. If there is a problem with wealth inequality, you would reflect on the cause of the problem. Capitalism. With a problem with crime, you'd reflect on the cause of the problem. Wealth inequality. What's the cause of that? Capitalism. What you don't do is yell at people who don't look the same as you. That's immature and irrational. So it goes all the way up and all the way down. So that problems are linked together into unity, which means we can trace that unity and determine the origin. That's what we need to do. So this is the first part, and then this is the nature of the pathologos in chapter 2. And then the condition and the transmission was how we looked at and understood that origin, the origin scene. So what else is the pathologos? It's a monad, it manifests numerous occurrences of itself, comes from a dramatic scene, is cyclical, has all its problems linked together in a unity, which means you can determine its origin, but also it's a network of beliefs. While there might be a fundamental false belief about self and reality, there's a whole network of beliefs that link together and function as meshing gears. This belief that nobody likes you helps your idea of, if I speak up, people will get mad, and that will help me with no one listens to me, and this will help me, I've got nothing good to say, and I better be a servant of others because my goals are dumb. They all fit together. You can see. And we need to see it. Just as when we study being in philosophy, we see how beauty is linked with justice. Hey, is there a beauty in justice? Is there a justice in beauty? Is there a goodness in both? How does that relate to whole and part? How does it relate to courage? So we need to see how all of these eidos, again, not forms, you may have a bad understanding of what philosophy is, and one of the reasons is the word eidos, which is one of these meshing gears within being, is being translated as a form, which is a physical word, using physical language to understand the realm of being. That's literally the problem Socrates started philosophy with. So it's tragically ironic that the way we teach Socrates and Plato today is literally so bullshit. It's the exact same problem Socrates started with. When Socrates met Parmenides, he said, I'm struggling to understand these eidos, these aspects of being, because one of the aspects is likeness, but then another aspect is unlikeness. How can two things fit together if they're opposites? And Parmenides says, hey, Socrates, your problem is you're using a language derived from the physical world, of the physical senses, of the world of becoming, using that language to understand the realm of being. You're going to have problems. You got to do some work and master the dialectic. Literally, the way we teach Plato and Socrates in our world today, which is against any of this understanding, none of this, you don't do any of this. Nothing legitimate in the way that we teach Socrates and Plato and true philosophy today. One of the fundamental causes is the word eidos, which means the aspects of being, is translated as form. What has a form? Physical things. I remember when I was at college, they said, Plato and Socrates believe that there is an actual heavenly chair in the sky. That gives us the form of a chair. And that's why we all laugh at Socrates and we leave the Greeks behind. Now we're into like Nietzsche and Hegel and that crap. What we call moderns, those that reject understanding and dianoia and reject the realm of being. So of course, that's what we call straw man argument. So it's not form, just keep in mind, because you might be really into philosophy and you talk about it to your friend who's studying at college and he goes, no, Socrates, he's so old fashioned, we know he was wrong. He thought that there was a form of chairs. You can say, actually, if you read the Greek, it's not form, it's eidos, which is a word that means to behold, because you can behold these aspects of being in direct experience of it in nous. What's nous? Never heard that before. That's because you don't read the Balboa translation. You need to be reading that. Okay, so in a similar way, there is a network of meshing beliefs together within our monad of our pathologos, just as there are a network of connecting eidos together within the monad of pure being, which generates itself. Again, each of these things you can create a question: how does this help us understand true being and philosophy? So there's a network of beliefs that function together as meshing beliefs, meshing gears. So you could say, well, even though it functions negatively to cause our problems and suffering, there is a kind of beauty in how your idea that no one listens to you connects with your idea that you've got a bad voice, connects with your idea that you shouldn't be in charge, connects with your idea that you should be a Cinderella to others, be a slave to others. There is a kind of beauty that supports the underlying monad of the pathologos, which can be difficult to see considering how awful it is and its functioning in our lives. At one level, of course, if we are able to reach or gain freedom from our pathologos, gain freedom from our idea that we are just our physical form, our physical idea of ourselves, and reach being, we can experience eternity. In that experience of eternity, all time, all at once, the ups and downs that we have in this particular lifetime would seem very, very insignificant. But if you can see, it's these ups and downs of having ignorance of self and being, and having a false belief about self and being that created the necessary conditions for me to master the logos and the dialectic, which allowed me to get back to self and being with understanding and an art that I wouldn't have if I didn't have a problem causing me to learn how to fix it, then you could say, well, actually the pathologos has a justice to it, a necessary condition that was actually beneficial. But that can be very hard to see when you're in your problem, which is why we need to stay in the game, realize it's a relationship, keep going, keep working on ourselves, keep helping each other, keep encouraging each other, and keep practicing them virtues like courage that say, hey, even when it's hard, stay in the game. Until, of course, we reach that experience of being and eternity and we realize, okay, sucked to be in the pathologos, but if the pathologos gave me the conditions to be super motivated to learn midwifery in the logos, yeah, I can see why it was needed. Just like a bad dream, you can have a nightmare, and in that nightmare, that's all you know. You don't realize you're dreaming. You don't realize you've lived before. You don't realize you're in bed. So it can really suck to be in that nightmare. But if you realize the meaning of dreams, the significance of dreams, to help you with your understanding and removal of your pathologos, and to help guide you in philosophy, mastery of the logos, then you can see, yeah, while it sucked to be in it, so long as you unpack its meaning using that language we're learning here, you can see how it was actually helpful. In the chat, hey there, how's everyone holding up? Welcome, Lucas, Brazil. I hope you enjoy the podcast. And if you enjoy it, you're welcome to find links to the previous episodes on YouTube. There should be a link below. If you really get into it, you can join the Discord. Should be a link to that as well. So yeah, I hope you you pick up what we land down. So what else do we say about the nature of the pathologos? It's a living dialectic. Dialectic is that relationship of two things, self and other. Why? Because if we were just self, if we were just the one self, how would we have the conditions to develop logos, to develop understanding? To understand ourselves, there has to first be something different or other. So you can say self and other, or self and different, or subject and other. That creates the condition for what we're doing here, our job, our purpose, our destiny. If life is a game, as Alan Watts says and Pierre Graham says, and this mastery of the logos is the noblest game, we would stick our head into that conversation between the great Alan Watts and the greater Pierre Grimes and say, by the way, it's the only game in town. So we are a living dialectic, only we're in the negative idea of self. We're gaining an understanding of the false idea of self, non-being, which means that so there's the pathologos in relation to us. So self would be pathologos and us would be other. So that pathologos refines itself. So this is why we say we're a living dialectic. Every moment, every experience, every relationship, every activity, every second you decide to do something with your time, you are successively refining this dialectic. So up here we talked about how it manifests numerous instances of itself. It's cyclical. Look how there's a progression in the ideas. So there's kind of two fundamental images here. There's one of the whole network, the monad, the whole meshing of gears, and then there's one of flow through time, successive instances, cyclical natures of ups and downs in our life, but also the successive refinements. So you can say, as this is the whole, a living dialectic, and how does it manifest through time? You flow. Every moment you're successively refining the pathologos dialectic. What starts as a basic image of yourself, you stay in the game, you practice it, you talk to yourself in that way, you choose activities based on that. Well, I'm too ugly to talk to girls, I'm going to play video games. It's just an example. Or my image of myself is that I'm very outgoing, so I'm not going to stay inside tonight and read philosophy, I'm going to go to that party. So a basic image of yourself, then through successive refinements in your life, your livingness, becomes your mask. It's the mask you put on. It's how you face the world. That mask becomes your persona. So notice you're getting more and more identified with it. It becomes an image, then you put on that image as a mask, then it becomes your persona, your personality. Right? There are instances of actors and comedians who put on a persona for their act, and then they stay in it so long it becomes their regular way of being. So at the moment, there's a meme about how comedians realize, or even comedians and content creators realize that the people who are more easy to exploit are people who have a stronger pathologos. They don't think for themselves as well. And of course, pathologos is negative. So the racists, the sexists, what we call the right-wingers or the conservatives, the incels, these are the people most easy to exploit. So they adopt their content or their mask or their act to appeal to those. So you see a lot of them not willing to challenge Donald Trump, or not willing to challenge sexism, or not willing to engage in reasoned reflection because that's being intellectual. But then over time, like Joe Rogan, for example, the most popular podcaster at the time of this recording, it becomes his whole persona. He actually identifies as a fascist, Republican, right-winger, conservative, blah, blah, blah. So we can see that play out on the cultural sphere with these actors and comedians and content creators. We call that sometimes becoming audience locked. So a lot of these people, a lot of these grifters, they realize they can't tell the truth about certain things because their audience will get mad at them, so they become audience locked. But then over time, it becomes more and more their way of being until they just end up full on racist. So a lot of the comedians that started off, oh, thank you for the follow, that started off actually different and reflecting and understanding and maybe challenging power, can become audience locked and then become like Ricky Gervais and Joe Rogan. I don't know whether he was ever a comedian. They become, they're locked into their persona. Hello, welcome Chippity Chip. So this is what we are doing. Okay, so we look at political or cultural or mainstream things as examples because what we are understanding is the cause of why that happens. Why this happens with actors, comedians, content creators. But also it's a mirror to understand ourselves because what we are here for primarily is to understand ourselves, to remove our own problems, to gain a mastery of the logos for our own benefit. So what? Also, in a similar way, we're doing the exact same thing. Same principle applies to us. So long as we have the Pathologos alive, then it starts as all these things about what the Pathologos is. It's a monad. Problems are linked together. A network of beliefs are linked together. It's from a dramatic scene. It manifests and creates numerous instances. Cyclical. It's an underlying false belief about oneself in reality that becomes a basic image of the self. That becomes your mask. Every activity you choose, every moment, every way of relating to yourself becomes your persona. That persona is your characteristic way of relating to oneself and the world. So it's easy to see in other cultures because they have a lot of similarities. In Australia, a lot of guys then, it's funny, like I remember being in high school and there's a certain age where kids started putting on that mask of their parents, and then these 14-year-olds who normally speak like this, all of a sudden started speaking like this. Like they haven't actually changed, but they're just imitating that mask. All right there, love. All right there, son. It's kind of odd to hear a 14-year-old talking like that. I remembered it was very funny when I was experiencing it. But this is the same thing with our Pathologos. A characteristic way of relating to ourselves. And then you become identified with it. This is me. It's not just a mask. It's not just a persona. It's just not a comfortable and familiar way of treating people. All right there, son. How's it going there, love? That's not your voice. It's your dad's voice. His dad's voice. But eventually we play out this dialectic in our lives until we finish our life having been identified. So we are learning about ourselves, whether we like it or not. We are a living dialectic. That's the learning process, whether we like it or not. The only difficulty is, are we learning what's false or what's true? Are we doing vice or virtue? Are we in ignorance and doing harm, or are we in virtue and doing good? That's the only two. Are we in the dark side or the light side? That's it. Because everybody who's not doing philosophical midwifery and reading the Balboa translation of Socrates to master the logos, this is the game that we're in. Also, there are counterattacks. The Pathologos has counterattacks. Notice, a shield and sword. The defense of the Pathologos. How does the Pathologos defend itself? It wouldn't be much of a block if you could just knock it over. So if we have the stairs that we climb to our goals, and then as we climb it, so we call that the logos, the stairs of the logos. And the ultimate goal is our destiny, which is linked to knowing self and true reality, or being, or reality, or mind. Call it the same thing. But If it was that easy, then we'd all be doing it. We have to also be doing midwifery because as you climb, you reach a block. We have to also be addressing the blocks. If you've ever learnt anything, you know that. If you've ever had a good and bad coach, you know that. Because if you've had a bad coach, he just tells you the logos. This is how you kick a soccer ball. This is how you run a formation. This is how you set a pick and roll. Self and being, or reality, or mind. But is a bad coach because that doesn't work. Everyone is a human being and we have problems. We have blocks to learning, blocks to running the pick and roll, blocks to asking for a pass. A good coach also does what he does to help you uncover, understand, and remove those blocks. All good teachers do this. All of them. So we're learning how to be good teachers as well. But it wouldn't be much of a block if you could just kick it out of the way and keep going. It'd be a rubbish block. And Pathologos is not a rubbish block. It's literally more powerful than enlightenment because people have enlightenment experiences and then give them a week or so and they're back to their problems. So it's the most powerful force in our universe. So what? Well, how does it stay a block? It has to defend insights you get. You ever had a conversation with your friend and says, oh, nobody likes me, I'm no good. And you say, hang on a second, let's talk about this. We all like you, or you really contribute to the group, or I like meeting up with you for coffee. And I say coffee, and so we have some coffee. Or water if you're drinking water. And he might go, oh yeah, I never thought about it that way. But then you meet up with him to talk in a week, he's in the same problem. He's somehow forgotten or undermined everything from that conversation. I have seen this a million times. Betty keeps getting into that relationship with that kind of a guy. This is why it's a block. It has to defend itself. It undermines conclusions. The Pathologos defends itself. Defense of the Pathologos is another way of saying the counterattack. Undermines conclusions. Conclusions are doubted. Yeah, I don't really know that. Well, I reasoned it through and I actually am not so bad after all, but I doubt that. Or my friend Jake said that I was actually a good contributing member to our friend group, but nah, I don't know. Methods are challenged. I think maybe Jake tricked me when he said that I was a good friend. I don't know. Or Pathologos. This midwifery thing, this new paradigm of psychotherapy, surely if it was a paradigm, other people would be doing it in their practice. Or I don't know, maybe Freud was right. Maybe Carl Jung was right. Maybe doubt and disbelief flood the mind. How can I know the new paradigm for understanding and solving human problems? How can I realize that there is a single unified or monadic tradition of understanding and spirituality that would put an end to all spiritual conflict, all religious conflict, all political conflict, and all fundamentally conflict within my soul? How can I do that? I'm just Barry. Notice that kind of way of thinking sounds believable to most people, even though there was no evidence or reason to support any of it. If it's true, it's true. It doesn't matter if you're Barry or Jill or a Buddhist or a Taoist or a black person or a woman or a white person or a Jew. Doesn't matter. If it's true, it's true. But who am I to understand how to solve problems and benefit from it? How am I to reach a destiny that very, very few people reach? That kind of feels true, even though there's nothing to back it up. See the power, or see the, what we call it, the advantage the Pathologos has to undermine anything that you learn in this game? So that's called the counterattack. This also has to be understood, because otherwise, if we don't understand it, we don't understand the Pathologos. We can't free ourselves. Conclusions, whoops. So how does the counterattack function? Conclusions are doubted, which is why it's a relationship. You have a midwife talk or you have a reflection using the dialectic on your pathologos, you might come to a fantastic insight and everyone's happy. But then you might have to have that same conversation in a week or a month. We are in a relationship. So while the Pathologos is going through successive refinements, us mastering the logos by doing midwifery, we are also going through successive refinements. Notice the same pattern or structure of the dialectic in both what is and what isn't. So don't be a slave to the Pathologos refining itself. Become a hero, the true hero's journey, and successively refine the logos through many instances of midwifery and philosophy. You are perfecting your self-identity with the self-logos to the actual self. So it's a relationship. And it has to be because there are counterattacks. Your conclusions are doubted. You need to see more, or you need to go through it again. Or go deeper even. Just like in philosophy, you've had one experience of being or nous, one enlightenment experience, you need to see it again. You need to go deeper, you need to go further, and even address the cause. Methods are challenged. I've seen that a million times. I've been doing this for a couple of decades, and I've seen maybe thousands of midwife talks, and it's funny in a way. It's funny because of, I don't know how not predictable, but how cyclical this is. You'll get people come into the game and they're very excited because finally they've found a way of solving problems, or finally they've found a way of personal development that actually works. It isn't just positive thinking or, a scam. Now, fortunately, now when we have more access to internet, it's easier to see through these scammers. But on the other hand, there are a lot of more people doing the scams. They have an alpha male course or a personal spirituality course or all this stuff that they're selling. There are a lot more pyramid schemes and scams. And a lot of them are kids. Because a lot of these kids are copying Andrew Tate, who are scamming people in this way. So you have these weird videos of 10-year-olds saying, hey, I'll teach you how to get rich and get a Bugatti. And they're 10 years old. Or they're teaching you about how to pick up women. This is how you get a date. And they're like 12. It's really weird. But back in the day, it was like Tony Robbins or, I don't know, or whatever religious tradition you grew up in. And that was about it. Anyway, so they'd be really happy to learn something that actually works and wasn't a scam. And they get really into it, really excited. But then they'd hit their limit. And instead of staying in the game, because it's a relationship, you keep doing it. It's a choice you make every moment. You're either choosing the logos or you're choosing to be a slave to the pathologos. Then they'll get to a stage where they'll really have to challenge their mum or their dad or their Judaism or their Christianity or their Mormonism, whatever it happens to be for them, or their sexism, could be anything. Really challenge a fundamental false belief that's fundamental to them being a member of the family. And then they'll start saying, I don't think this is a good method. I think you can take a bit of midwifery and add it to a bit of person-centered counseling and a bit of transactional analysis and a bit of behavioral therapy and a bit of this great thing I learned in my Christian camp, and you can make a hodgepodge. Right. That's what I think. And it's really funny because that's silly. Doesn't make any sense. If it's a paradigm, it's a paradigm. It's not a hodgepodge. That's opinions. That's eclectic. Or they haven't really read the whole book and they're saying, well, actually, I think there's a problem with this. And they use it as a justification for leaving the game, ending the relationship, blocking the logos. And if they read the book, they'd be able to recognize, oh crap, I'm ending the relationship. I'm ending the logos. That's literally how the pathologos functions. That's the comedy of it. If they read the book, they realize what they're doing, but they claim to know better. Anyway, I've seen it lots and lots of times. And so I'm sharing that because we can learn from that. We can benefit from that. Expect it yourself. You need to expect the counterattack, especially if you're having insights, because the Pathologos functions to undermine conclusions. So if you're having more conclusions, if you're following the logos even better, you better watch out for those Pathologos. Now, watch out doesn't mean avoid them. They're going to happen. Understand them, recognize them, smile at them. Use it as an opportunity to practice relating to yourself in a good way. If a friend came up to you and said, oh, you suck, or your insights suck, or you can't do philosophy, you wouldn't go, oh yeah, I guess I believe you because you said it and you're so smart. You wouldn't. You'd ask him questions. Well, why do you think that? Let's look at it. Let's use the logos to examine it. Let's see if it's true. If it is true, what parts of it are true? And how can I develop an understanding, not just take your advice or believe you? Beliefs are crap. Beliefs are stupid. Literally, beliefs are what cause our problems. Understanding is great and fantastic, and everyone can follow, and are true. Beliefs are not true. They might be sometimes, but who knows? You're just believing. Beliefs is to believe someone else. That's why when someone says, let me give you advice, you say, let me run away from you, because screw that crap. Pretend that you're a knower. Pass on your opinions and beliefs. Get a dog. The dogs listen to you anyway. And sadly, it's often get a kid. Pass on that family curse. That's the Pathologos. So the greater your insights, the greater you can expect the Pathologos counterattacks, and the more opportunity you have to practice relating to yourself in this new way. Don't just believe it because it's there. Like you wouldn't just believe your friend because he's saying it. You'd ask him questions, you'd investigate. You'd see, hey, by the way, if he's saying it, maybe he's wrong. He has to also be open to learning. If a friend says, I'm always right, then you say, you're not my friend anymore. Get out of here, you crazy bastard. Go start a cult if you want to always be right. That's not human being. Human beings are not always right. That's crazy talk. So, use it as an opportunity to practice this new way of being. Your conclusions will be doubted. The method's challenged. Hey, this understandable structure of reality called logos and dialectic. Garbage. I don't know. The way you'd say it is also a clue. The way that you reject it are clues. Every Pathologos counterattack can also be seen as a benefit if you unpack it. We talked about dreams. Nightmares can suck when you're in them. Really be painful and scary. But if you unpack them using the language of dreams, which again is the logos, it's the paradigm of understanding, you do dream analysis in this same method of the dialectic, then you can unpack the meaning of them. They can be really, really beneficial. Often nightmares are your mind saying you're ready to see something, and it's so important, I'm not going to let you forget it. Or you haven't been paying attention, here's a little kick in the bum, pay attention. So similarly, the counterattack, the way you dismiss it, is clues if you unpack it. How did I dismiss it? Did you say, an understandable paradigm to understand everything, dreams, music, our problems and our destiny? It's garbage. Because if it was true, it would be taught in Cambridge, and my dear papa, a lecturer of Cambridge, would have it, and I, someone with a degree, would know it because see my PhD on my wall? Therefore it is trash and gobbledygook and hoopla. That has a certain persona to it, a certain mask to it, a certain characteristic way of relating to self in the world. Pompous, British, whatever, I don't know, just made it up. But all of those are clues that we can then trace back through the midwifery to get to its cause, address it, and free ourselves from that crap and from the counterattack. So even counterattacks can be gold if we stay in the game at all times. You're either a slave to its nonsense or You're like Socrates. Socrates meets people all the time who think they know better. They tell Socrates, you should give up philosophy. You are an idiot. You are a flat-headed stingray. You are a sorcerer, tricking me with your words. But Socrates always relates to them in the same way. Oh, let's make a joke about that and smile. By the way, always a joke that builds us up. And let's get back to the logos. Let's investigate. Let's see if it's true. Let's look at this part. Let's take the highest part of what you said as a way of getting back into following the logos. Always. What's the alternative? Listening to that counterattack, listening to that voice, listening to Meno or Ion or Gorgias or someone saying, shut up, Socrates. And then imagine Socrates going, oh yeah, you're from a rich family, or you sound really authoritative, or you're really angry when you say philosophy is dumb. I guess I'll stop being Socrates and not do philosophy. Imagine if he did that. Literally, the way of understanding the logos comes from this guy. He was the best at it. He didn't write anything down, unfortunately, but his student did, and he was fantastic too. That allows us to. 2,500 years later, we can overcome our problems individually and as a species because of Socrates. Imagine if he listened to all of these people telling him, shut up. If you read any of his dialogues, they go through counterattacks often in a single dialogue. So Socrates is obviously very familiar with it. He doesn't take it personally. He either laughs it off or uses his charm to step around it, or he takes the highest part of that counterattack and says, oh, you say this? You say it's not good to do philosophy, and I should shut up? That's interesting. You're mentioning the word good. What is the good? Let's investigate that with the logos and the dialectic. What is goodness itself? So in other words, Socrates is always in it. We can always be in it, even when we have our counterattacks, which are to be expected, because that's part of it. And if we do reflect on it, we can unpack gold. We can mine gold. Because you might not have your counterattack that way. You might be like, I can understand the logos, and that can take me higher even than being. Being is the eternal and immortal and the creator of our physical world, so that technically is God. So the self can be greater than God, and that's not a belief. You don't need beliefs. You can understand it and verify it for yourself and use that as an art to benefit yourself and others all the time. Greater than God, that's heresy. What about my religious book? These people who lived 5,000 years ago, they were smarter than you. Well, Bronze Age, these Bronze Age farmers, they're smarter than you. How dare you question heresy? Burn him at the stake. That's a very different way of counterattacking your own insight and your own understanding. So, why is it one person is, oh, Mr. Cambridge would say differently, another guy is saying, heretic, burn him. Two different masks, two different personas, two different things that are relevant specifically to you to help you, so long as you unpack it, so long as you are a master and not a slave, so long as you're following the logos and not a slave to the pathologos. So that's the methods challenged. Doubt and disbelief flood the mind. Same thing again. What is the nature of your doubt? What are you doubting or disbelieving about your own self, your own conclusions, your own seeing, your own experience? Hey, by the way, is there a history to that? Can we trace this kind of doubt and disbelief backwards? So if the pathologos manifests cyclically, can you trace it backwards this way? Do you remember last week doubting yourself in a similar way? Or maybe yesterday? Was it yesterday? What about the day before? What about last week? What about last year? What about when you were at primary school? What about when you were really young? Can you trace it backwards to find the origin of all of these manifestations of problems that cyclically evolve through time? Because at the root nature of the pathologos, it is a singular, it is a monad, so it does have an understandable, knowable origin, but it also has the quality of manifesting numerous occurrences of itself, allowing it to unfold cyclically, allowing us to create a map of all of the different problems and instances and beliefs that we have. So the fact that it is two primary qualities of monadness and manifestation, just like being, it is a ousia monad, it's self-contained in eternity, but it's so perfect that it overflows and manifests. So beauty itself creates numerous instances in our physical world. So the world of being manifests into the world of becoming. That's the physical one that we see with our physical senses. Being we see with the sense of mind, or ousia, the eye of the soul. So for there to be a beautiful puppy, a beautiful woman, a beautiful painting, a beautiful song, there have to be numerous occurrences of beauty itself. That's what we trace back through philosophy. That's how you start as a philosopher. You realize, oh, many beautiful things. What's the cause? Now you're in the game of philosophy, if you pursue that line of reflection. Because being is monadic, but it can unfold. Notice, instances of itself. So we can understand the unfolding of the dimensions of reality as reflections. Just like you look in a mirror, you are a 3D person, you see a 2D reflection, but it's diminished. It's one dimension lower. It lacks self-will, it lacks self-intelligence. So will and intelligence, autonomy, it's not free, your reflection isn't free. These are higher qualities of existence. So the higher qualities of will and intelligence that you have, that your mirror reflection don't have, are higher dimensional qualities, more evolved. If that's true of a 3D to 2D, keep going. What's the 4D realm? And which is this 4D or 5D? Being? If being itself is that, then every dimension of reality that we find ourselves in the physical one on our way back are like reflections or numerous occurrences of itself. And if that's what's true of being, then the same would be true of non-being, or the pathologos. The pathologos is a monad, so it's a single thing that we can understand. The pathologos manifests itself. Those are the two primary things, allowing it to be cyclical in its unfolding through time, which means we can trace it back. We start with a counterattack. Oh, what's the nature? Is it that pompous British guy, or is it that crazed fundamentalist religious person? Whatever it is, what are the words? What are the thoughts? What are the feelings? Has it happened yesterday, last week, the year before, when you applied for that job, when you wanted to get married, when you're at school, when you're at primary school, when you're at your house, or even earlier? You can trace it back because of these qualities to its original dramatic scene. So that's the kind of false initiation. They were appearing to be wise and knowing, just like a guru. Or self-being is when you get, if there's a kind of initiation of yourself into self-being, the monad. And that the fact that it can be linked together means that we can do this tracing back to determine its origin and see how all our problems are interrelated and connected, shows an intelligibility and understandability. And then we can say, oh, actually, this is the fact. I can see that they're connected, but I can also see how they're connected. Look at how this belief fits with this belief, and they all manifest. There's a kind of beauty in how they all support each other and create each other and sustain each other, so that it can sustain and manifest and cyclically continue. And by the way, that cyclical continuation, because of these things, allow it to cyclically continue in a way that refines itself. So it's kind of perfecting. So it's not just a monad, not just evolving. It's not just evolving cyclically. It's not just creating all our problems around itself so it can be mapped to find the origin, but it's also, and it's not just doing so through a connection of intermeshing gears of beliefs and problems, but it's also successively refining itself. Is a kind of perfection, only it's a perfection of what's false, which is why we say we're always in a dialectic. You're always in a kind of perfection or learning, only it's a question of whether it's what's true or what's false. That's true of you. That's true of your best friend. That's true of your parents. That's true of your neighbors. That's true of your president. That's true of every human being you meet, which is why it's important to master this as an art. Because everyone you meet will be in this kind of relationship, either with their pathologos or at some level of degree with the logos. You have to judge how far up the logos are they and how much into their problem are they. We're not either one or the other, always, but you might be in a problem. It might not be good to have coffee with your friend when he's really adamant about his problem, but he might be in a really reflective mood. It's important to judge. So there's that successive refinements, and as we try to break this cycle, so we're seeing its nature, its unfolding quality, the way it unfolds through time, how it unfolds through time, the significance of it unfolding through time and its refining itself, but also it has to be able to protect itself. So the same thing happens with what's true. In philosophy, as we reach our goals in philosophy, it's a relationship for philosophy. You're always in a conversation with yourself or others and the world. But once you do reach your goals, you have to protect them. One way of giving up your goals is reaching your goal and not maintaining it, defending it, nurturing it, evolving it. So you go right back down again. Similarly, in what's false, the pathologos, there is a kind of defense or maintaining of itself called the counterattack. Anything that you come up that your conclusions that challenge it are doubted. The methods are doubted. Doubt and disbelief flood your mind, which is why you have to be in philosophy, because the virtues that you learn through practice and discipline and nurture, like courage, are specifically to overcome this. Courage is to follow the logos even if your feelings say otherwise. When you are full of doubt and disbelief, keep the conclusions. It won't always be there. Once you stay in the game for long enough and you keep this relationship up, you will eventually become free of it. That's inevitable. That's the game. You will defeat the Death Star and defeat Darth Vader and the Emperor. You will become a Master Jedi if you stay in it and you do this with integrity. So that doubt and disbelief will be gone because the counterattacks are from the Pathologos, which will also be gone. But in the meantime, you have to jump them hurdles. So recognize the hurdles. Recognize that you have to follow the logos even if it doesn't feel true. Even if it's more comfortable to hate women, and you've learned Socrates saying, hey, by the way, men and women also can follow the logos. Virtue is the same for both. Oh, but I really hate women. Courage is to follow the logos based on understanding and truth, even if my pathologos are telling me, oh, this feels familiar or comfortable or safe, right? And that's what fascists appeal to, like Trump and conservatives and right-wingers, they appeal to that. Hey, didn't it feel good when you were young? Make America great again. Remember the past? Remember how you felt safe in your family? Oh, and you know what's different from your family? Women or immigrants. Right. Don't you feel scared of them? Don't you want to hate them and punish them? Oh, vote for me. And by the way, it's just a con. Talked about comedians and content creators being audience locked. It's the same thing for politicians. Whether they know it or not, that's what they're doing. But we need to follow the truth, even if what's false feels familiar or safe or comfortable, or you get a sadistic kick out of pretending to be knowing by crushing someone who's less fortunate. All a distraction from the actual logos. What is actually the cause of our problems? Oh, wealth inequality. What's the cause of that? Oh, capitalism. Capitalism is just fascism with more steps? Yeah. But what's the cause of that? Oh, well, we've got to learn the logos. How do we reflect and understand the cause of problems if we're not learning how to reflect and understand? That's the logos. So everyone should be reading Balboa version of Socrates every day at school? Yeah. By the way, you can't do that if you're not addressing the blocks. You're a human being, so you get blocks too. So we should also be doing midwifery every day at school? Yep. That would be being rational and mature. So the counterattack has two parts. It has the shield and the sword. It has a defense, the shield. What's the defense? A loyalty to the basic old beliefs. Notice basic. The beliefs itself don't evolve. The only evolution is, well, it's de-evolution, is you becoming more attached to what's false. That's a successive refinements. There isn't an improvement. They are basic. They are old. They are stupid. They are stinky. Let them go. Understand them and let them go. So that's the defense. So there's that insult that was thrown at Nazis in the World War I and II. They call them dogs. And I was always curious about that because dogs are amazing and great and beautiful creatures. But how could that be an insult? And I said, well, actually, a dog is loyal without actually judging who they're loyal to. A loyal dog is loyal to anyone. And the Nazis are loyal to Hitler. That's a problem, a kind of pathologos within the whole German culture that needs to be addressed. Otherwise, it'll happen again. What do we see now in the world? Oh my God, more Nazis and fascists all over the world. It's almost as if we didn't address the cause of the problem. Which is what? Midwifery. That's what we need to do. Which is why it's technically, rationally, the next stage of evolution. And if we don't do it, them Nazis come back with nuclear weapons now. That's the end of our game. It's the end of the human species. If there's a significance to keeping us alive, because we have a part or destiny to play within a greater whole, then it's worth evolving to be able to learn the logos, address the pathologos as well, both of the dialectic, so that we can find the cause of those problems, cause of Nazism, because who just got voted in America right now at time of this recording? Donald Trump. Who is a what? He's a fascist Nazi. And he's not hiding that. That's his marketing campaign. Proud Boys, stand back and stand by, and both people and then good people on both sides of that Nazi rally. It's not contentious. It's literally his marketing campaign. He is appealing to people who have a loyalty to the old beliefs. He's marketing to the pathologos. And of course, that doesn't mean the other team are doing good either. They got work to do as well. Anyway, again, we use cultural and political things to mirror the dynamics within our soul. This is for us. Also worth doing within our culture because it's true and good. So how does the counterattack manifest? A defense to those basic old beliefs. Notice, Make America Great Again isn't new to Trump. All goddamn Republicans use that expression for like years and years and years and years and years. It's an appeal to your family beliefs. Hey, Fast and Furious. Family is most important. Family, family, family. But you're doing crimes. Yes, but I'm cool. But doing crimes, what's so good about that, Fast and Furious, guys? Because family. What about truth? What about benefit? Family, family, family. That's my Dom Toretto impression. Vin Diesel. Okay, defense is that dog. Dogs are loyal without any rationality. Don't be loyal to the bad. That's bad. Be loyal to good. Or not loyal to good. See it through understanding so it's obvious. You wouldn't say, I eat breakfast every day because I'm loyal to food. No, it's obvious you need food. It's just basic and understanding. It's different than loyalty to beliefs. It's seeing through understanding. So what are the differences? Beliefs and understanding. The same two essences of the cause of problems that Socrates addressed. Right now, we're reading the Meno. And Meno thinks that virtue is being good to your friends and bad to your enemies. And Socrates says, well, who are your enemies? Oh, bad people. What are bad people? People who seek to do bad things. Heathens. Well, hang on a second. Does anyone really want bad things? Of course they do. But to say you want bad things is you're making them you, right? They're your things. You want them for yourself. Yeah. But don't bad things harm? Yeah. And if you have a bad thing, you make the bad things yourself and you get harmed, doesn't that make you miserable and a mean-spirited person? Yeah. Who wants to be miserable and mean-spirited? No one. So does anyone seek the bad? Well, I guess not. So we all do what we think is good. Well, what makes some people better than others? Some people have an understanding of what is good. Some people are tricked or conned or grifted to because of beliefs. Because beliefs don't have to be true. Understanding and recognition is. That's what it means. That's why understanding can unite us. That's why every mechanic understands the car. It doesn't just have a belief about whatever. We don't let crazy people say, well, I have a belief that I know medicine. We don't let them do surgery ever. Ever, ever, ever. You need to have understanding. So what's the problem? Beliefs versus understanding. That's where we are. What's the nature of understanding? Logos and dialectic. So what's the cause of our problems? Loyalty to basic old beliefs, which are fundamentally the cause of our problems because they convince you that bad things are good. Be loyal to the Nazis. That's a belief. Cultural pathologos, you could say. So how do you solve it? Understanding. What does a pathologos do? Defends through a loyalty to old beliefs, and its sword is the attacking your newly won understanding. Conclusions are doubted. Method is challenged. Doubt and disbelief flood your mind when you have understanding. It's an attack of... What do fascists do? They attack journalists. Trump, attacking journalists. They attack anyone who disagrees with... There's an enemy within. We must kill all the people who are left. We must kill the academics in their ivory towers. They call themselves elite because they have understanding. They have a loyalty to the false beliefs that cause their problems. Now, the Meno goes on to say, well, should you really harm the people who are the most hurt, the most ignorant, the most in need of medical care for the soul? Is that just? Or are they the people who are most in need of midwifery and understanding? That would be a compassionate, rational, fair, just species, world to live in, way of setting up our society. Therefore, the transition from our ignorant, immature, irrational, harmful level of evolution or level of development as a species would be into simply understanding, including understanding the false beliefs that cause our problem, and including understanding the nature of being and truth. So what does Pathologos have to do? Attack understanding. What does it have to do? Defend crappy old basic beliefs. What's the nature of understanding? The logos and dialectic. What are we doing here? Mastering the art of the logos and dialectic. What does it allow us to do? Get rid of this and climb up that way. But if it's the same logos and dialectic, you can also make a story or a myth. So what's the ultimate spiritual tradition? What is the game we're in? What's the paradigm of human beings' nature? This, and this. What is false, what is true, and what is both true and false. And the logos and dialectic applies to all three. Isn't that neat? What's the paradigm of our purpose? Midwifery, philosophy, and representing the principles that apply to both with our stories, our songs, our movies, our video games. That's the paradigm of paradigms. Is that neat? Yes. And what does Owen Wilson say?
Wow. 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 I don't want to eat a monkey. Wow. Wow.
Joe Rogan doesn't want to eat a monkey. He wants to do this.
Wow. I don't want to eat a monkey.
All right, so that's a review of that section there. The nature of the Pathologos, it's monadic. It manifests, it creates, it manifests itself. It's a kind of reflection or creation of itself. Where does it come from? Early dramatic scene to create the image of truth through all of those conditions that we looked at in our second, the conditions for the transmission. How does it play out? Cyclically in our lives. What's its nature with problems? All the problems can be linked together in this kind of mind map, which means you can see how it all fits together and you can follow it back to determine its origin right in the middle. That monadic thing, that all of these are the manifestations. Through time, it's cyclical with ups and downs. How does it function? Like, what's the way in which it does that? Oh, they're a network of beliefs that fit together and support each other like meshing gears. Disbelief with disbelief. Isn't that interesting? And then how does that play out in our life? You are a living dialectic in this way. Because that playing out of these whole qualities, the monadic quality of this, the monadic quality of this, because monadic means a oneness, means a wholeness of parts. That plays out cyclically, functions or concludes or results in refining itself. That's your living dialectic. You're living a dialectic of falseness, ignorance, and harm if you're not in this game. So if you care about someone, invite them to this game. Pathologos becomes your basic image of yourself, then it becomes a mask, then it becomes a persona, becomes your characteristical way of relating to yourself and other people, and then eventually you identify with it. And then a bad life lived poorly. Even that sounds like, oh, how dare you judge? Isn't all lives lived the same? Really? No, of course not. That's crazy. You're either in the game, you're either on the dark side or the light side. Hitler lived a life. Do you think he was living a good life? Because he's selective, refining what's false. So, of course, we have to judge. But again, a cultural count. And by the way, what's that idea? How dare you judge that you can live a bad life? Surely every life is just as good as everything else. Surely there's no difference between Socrates and Hitler. Garbage. That idea that it's impolite to judge is a counterattack. Counterattack is the defense. I'm going to defend my Nazi beliefs because they're basic old ones. And I'll attack understanding. What's understanding evolve? Recognizing that you have a dialectic of what's false and a dialectic of what's true. Judging, understanding why, understanding the parts, being able to rank them in a hierarchy of positive and less. Like medicine, what's a healthy body, what's a sick body? Oh, how dare you? It's mean to say cancer is less healthy than an Olympic athlete. Bollocks, it's not. That kind of thinking that says don't judge is what is given to slaves, so they don't judge their masters because their masters are disgusting and false, and they want you to be loyal to old beliefs that cannot stand the light of the logos, cannot stand the light of understanding, which is why Trump and Hitler and Pol Pot and all these other fascists and Nazis and dictators try and go after the understanding, because understanding is what we need to become rational, to enter the human race. All right, so that's the nature of the pathologos. Then we looked at the condition for its transmission. Over here we have the dramatic scene, but we also reflected on that today. The state of mind we needed to be in, the conditions of being a young person, dependent relationship, didn't recognize the difference between beauty and truth being connected in being and in the physical world of becoming. Physical beauty doesn't mean truth like it does in being. So we can be tricked more easily, can be traumatic to realize that your loved ones you're dependent on are actually working against your interests or ignorant or harmful or tyrannical. The milieu conditions, the states of mind and feeling states orchestrated, generated and maintained within the house that give you all these problems and consternations and things you need to make sense of, create the conditions for the drama itself, the dramatic drama itself, where you come to that conclusion, what the heck is going on here? So you can walk away with the conclusion yourself. You have to be in a good state of mind. So what we would normally want for philosophy, good, open, receptive, wondering state of mind. Also doing your own activity, focused on yourself, often when you're not doing physical things. So quiet, self-reflection, or doing your own thing. These are really, really good things. So it's when we're doing well that the imposition of the pathologos happens. It's not trauma. We're doing well. By the way, that imposition can be traumatic, doesn't have to be. It can be subtle. But it's not caused by trauma. We are starting in that early open receptive scene within the milieu, within the age where you're still dependent on authorities and you still believe that there is such a thing as authorities. And finally, the wordless, no questions, no logos, no words, all of the opposite things to philosophy. allows for this Pathologos to come into our soul, allowing us to be this life. And as we read in the Phaedo and then the Republic, there is a significance to living in this way, to how we die, where we go when we die, and what happens to us after, if we are able to reincarnate at all, and if we do, what we come back as, or if we're able to escape the prison of the chains of our problems and the prison of reincarnation. So there's a significance not just in this life, which is important, because the learning if we are here to learn anything, it has to be a learning we can take with us. That's why it's irrational to say we're here to make money. You can't take that with you when you die. And if we can experience eternity, like we said, a dream is significant when you're in it, but then you realize you've dreamt many dreams and you can understand them. So too with lives. If there is such a thing as being in eternity, that's a paradigm of truth, the very paradigm that we are using to understand midwifery and philosophy, then it has to be eternal, timeless for everyone, which is why we can unite our species. And that's why it's the next stage of evolution. It's always true. You don't have to be born with the right beliefs. It's understanding. So what we're here to do, rationally speaking, has to be a kind of learning. So because we can take that with our soul, we can't take our Bugattis and bank accounts. That is to do with eternity and how we function in our state of being and how we can benefit with that learning even in eternity and beyond. So so if you looked at life as a video game, it's learning the game, learning the goal of the game, which is nothing other than being rational, and as we said before, entering the true human race. The noblest game, as Pierre would say, and the only game in town, really. So, that's neat. Already, we've gained a pretty decent understanding of Pathologos and its transmission. But there are 11 parts. We're on to the third part. 11 parts in this section of chapter 2 about understanding the Pathologos. The next thing we will be doing is understanding amnesia. What role does amnesia or forgetfulness play? Already we know that the actual logos, philosophy, the Balboa Socrates, is in the Phaedo. He talks about how all learning is kind of remembering. So there's forgetfulness or amnesia plays a role in our destiny to master philosophy, but also how does it play a role in our Pathologos? What did we forget? We've already talked about the counterattack undermining our conclusions. Can we forget our conclusions? What did we forget as a child when we gave up our self-goals and self-interest and our self-experience and self-logos to buy into the family drama? Did we forget what we were doing before we gave up ourselves to become a slave to the Pathologos? Can we get it back? The same way we get back our knowledge of truth in philosophy? So, what is the role of amnesia? And what do we need to understand about it to become actual superheroes, to become actual Jedis? To play the game of midwifery, philosophy, and mythology, which is the human game, the Logos. Follow the Logos. Master the art of the Logos. So, with that question and that teaser for next time, I hope you join me next time. I hope you're wondering about the role of amnesia. I hope you are wondering about the significance of all we've seen today. And I hope you're wondering about if you will have a counterattack to this summary. If you are following along this far, then that summary probably makes a lot of sense because you've been reading along with us. So, we came to a whole bunch of conclusions today. Not just about the Pathologos, but about the meaning of life, our destiny as human beings, how we solve our problems, how to make sense of the political conflict in the world. Came to a lot of conclusions. What would be the unified spiritual tradition that anyone can play in? That's not based on belief, but based on truth. These are a lot of conclusions. And if it made sense for you, then you can keep a smile and an eye out for the counterattacks, because those conclusions have to be doubted. Because those conclusions fly in the face of our ignorance, our false beliefs, our pathologos. Doubted. So, I hope you're wondering with a smile about your counterattacks, and I hope you're wondering about the role amnesia plays, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for the new chatters who hung out today. I appreciate you hanging out, and I appreciate you stopping in to say hello. I hope you got something out of it. Again, feel free to jump onto the YouTube site if you want to go through the old episodes, not old, the previous episodes. And if you want to join the Discord, you're welcome to, and you'll get a notification when we go live, so you can always know when to jump in if you want to jump in and share your questions or insights or wondering or successes, because philosophy is not a solo quest. It's not a one-person game.
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
Which is why Gandalf says that. So, lots of fun today. I hope to see you next time. Thank you once again for joining me. Bye.